Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been there, haven't we? Those days when you're utterly drained physically, mentally, and emotionally. You feel like you're running on fumes and the idea of taking one more step feels impossible. But here's the truth. Being tired doesn't mean you failed. It means you've tried, cared, and shown up. Today, I want to share 5 ways to reignite your spark when the flame feels dim. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin by acknowledging something we all experience but often hesitate to admit: exhaustion. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or how much you've accomplished. Every single one of us has faced moments when we feel drained, overwhelmed, or just plain worn out. And yet, so often we pretend we're fine. We slap on a smile, push forward, and try to ignore the weight pressing down on us. Why? Because we've been taught that admitting we're tired or worse, vulnerable, is a sign of weakness. But here's the truth. It's not weakness, it's humanity. You see, vulnerability isn't something to avoid or be ashamed of. It's a profound strength. To say, I'm tired or I'm struggling takes courage. It takes honesty. And most importantly, it takes self-respect. Think about it. When you admit you're not at your best, you're giving yourself the permission to pause, to regroup, and to grow. Isn't that a far greater strength than pretending everything is perfect? Now, let me give you an example. Imagine a busy parent juggling work deadlines, school pickups, and endless to-do lists. They're exhausted, but they keep going day after day, thinking, I can't let anyone down. But what happens when they finally sit down with their family and say, I'm feeling overwhelmed? Instead of judgment, they're often met with love, understanding, and offers of support. By admitting their vulnerability, they strengthen the bond with their loved ones and create a space where honesty is not just accepted, but celebrated. Or think about a workplace scenario. Picture a manager standing before their team admitting, I don't have all the answers right now, and I could use your input. That's not a leader showing weakness. It's a leader building trust. Vulnerability like that opens doors to collaboration and innovation. It tells the team we're in this together, and that's powerful. Yet, despite these examples, many of us resist being vulnerable because we fear judgment. What if people see us as weak? What if they think less of us? But let me ask you this: when someone you respect admits they're struggling, do you think less of them? Or do you feel closer to them? Do you see their admission as a flaw, or does it inspire you? The irony is that the very thing we're afraid of showing our humanity is what makes us relatable, lovable, and deeply connected to others. Think about the times you've shared a personal struggle with a friend and they've replied, me too. Didn't that moment of shared vulnerability make you feel understood? Didn't it remind you that you're not alone? When we embrace our vulnerability, we unlock an incredible superpower, the ability to connect with others in a real and meaningful way. We stop wearing masks and start living authentically. And authenticity is magnetic. It draws people to you. It inspires trust. It builds relationships that can weather any storm. So, the next time you're feeling tired, overwhelmed, or unsure, I challenge you to take a deep breath and lean into that feeling. Don't fight it or hide from it. Name it. Own it. And then share it, whether it's with a friend, a partner, a colleague, or even just yourself in the mirror. Say the words, this is hard, and I need a moment. By doing so, you're not only honoring your own needs, but also showing others that it's okay to be human. And in a world that often feels obsessed with perfection, that's a gift of honesty, connection, and courage. Ladies and gentlemen, vulnerability is not the end of strength, it's the beginning. It's what makes us brave, what keeps us real, and what helps us grow. Embrace it and watch as it transforms not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like you're just going through the motions, like you're stuck in the grind, doing what needs to be done, but feeling like something's missing? It's a strange emptiness that creeps in, especially when we're tired, overwhelmed, or stretched thin. But let me tell you this, that feeling is not a sign that you're failing, it's a signal. A quiet but powerful nudge that says, hey, maybe it's time to reconnect with your purpose. Purpose. It's such a big word, isn't it? We hear it all the time, but what does it actually mean? Simply put, your purpose is your why. It's the thing that drives you, the reason you get up in the morning, the fire that fuels your soul. Without it, life can feel like a long list of tasks with no meaning behind them. And let's be honest, who wants to live like that? But here's the tricky part. When we're tired or overwhelmed, purpose often gets buried under the noise of everyday life. We get so caught up in what we're doing that we forget why we're doing it. That's when it's time to pause and ask yourself the big question, why am I here? and what truly matters to me. Let me give you an example. Imagine a teacher who's been in the classroom for years. Day after day, they deal with lesson plans, grading papers, and navigating endless challenges. It's exhausting, and sometimes they think, why am I even doing this? But then one day a former student comes back and says, you changed my life. Because of you, I believed I could achieve my dreams. That moment of clarity, that reminder of their why reignites their passion. Suddenly, the exhaustion doesn't feel so heavy because they've reconnected with their purpose. Or think about a parent working long hours to provide for their family. There are nights when they're so tired, they can hardly think straight. But then their child runs up to them, hugs them tight, and says, I love you. That single moment reminds them of their why. It's not about the paycheck or the late nights, it's about creating a life of love and opportunity for their family. Purpose doesn't have to be some grand, world-changing mission. It can be as simple as wanting to be there for the people you care about, making someone smile, or contributing in a way that feels meaningful to you. What matters is that it's your purpose, something that speaks to your heart and gives you a sense of fulfillment. But how do you find it, especially when you're feeling drained? Start by stepping back and reflecting. Ask yourself, what brings me joy? What makes me feel alive? What would I fight for, even on the hardest days? These questions aren't always easy, but they're worth exploring. And here's the thing, your purpose isn't set in stone. It can evolve as you grow and change. Maybe what motivated you 5 years ago doesn't resonate anymore. That's okay. Life is about adapting and rediscovering what matters most to you in each season. Now, let me share one more story. A friend of mine was working a corporate job they hated. Every morning felt like a struggle, and they were counting the days until the weekend. One day they sat down and asked themselves, why am I doing this? The answer wasn't what they expected. They realized they weren't working for the money or the title. They were doing it to gain the skills and experience they needed to start their own business. Once they reconnected with that purpose, everything changed. They started seeing their work not as a burden, but as a stepping stone to their dream. And when the time came, they made the leap and built something amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, when life feels heavy, when the spark seems to fade, don't lose hope. Pause, breathe, and reconnect with your why. Remember what matters most to you and let that guide you forward. Because when you live with purpose, even the hardest days become meaningful. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about those moments when life feels like an uphill battle. You know, the ones I mean when your energy is low, your to-do list is towering, and it feels like even getting started is impossible. In times like these, it's so easy to feel stuck, to look at the mountain ahead and think there's no way I can climb that. But what if I told you that the secret isn't about conquering the mountain all at once? It's about taking one small step at a time. Here's the thing about small wins, they might not seem like much at first, but they are powerful. They are the foundation of momentum, the little sparks that light a fire when you feel like you've got nothing left. And the best part, they're always within reach. Let me share a simple story. There's a woman I know who wanted to run her first marathon. She was excited at first, but as she looked at the training plan, miles upon miles of running it completely overwhelmed her. How could she possibly get there? Instead of giving up, she decided to focus on one thing, running for just 5 minutes every day. That's it, 5 minutes. It didn't seem like much, but over time, those 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20, then miles. By focusing on small, manageable wins, she built the confidence and stamina she needed to cross the finish line. Now think about your own life. Maybe it's not a marathon you're facing. Maybe it's a project at work, a messy house, or a personal goal you've been putting off. When you're low on energy, the idea of tackling the whole thing can feel impossible. But what if you broke it down into the smallest step? Instead of writing the entire report, just outline the first paragraph. Instead of cleaning the whole house, just clear one corner of the kitchen. Instead of committing to an hour at the gym, start with a 10-minute walk. The beauty of small wins is that they create a ripple effect. Accomplishing one tiny task gives you a sense of achievement, and that sense of achievement fuels you to take on the next step. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. It starts small, but it grows bigger and stronger with each rotation. Here's another example. A friend of mine was struggling with anxiety and couldn't imagine facing a full day of responsibilities. So she made a deal with herself, just get out of bed and brush your teeth. That was her small win. And when she did it, she felt a little spark of pride. That spark gave her the energy to get dressed and then to make breakfast and eventually to take on the day. It all started with something as simple as brushing her teeth. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't it silly to celebrate such small things? Not at all. Small wins are not about the size of the task, they're about the shift in mindset. When you celebrate progress, no matter how tiny, you're training your brain to see success instead of failure, action instead of inaction, possibility instead of doubt. And that shift can change everything. Think about how children learn. They don't go from crawling to running marathons overnight. They take one step, stumble, and try again. And when they succeed, we cheer like they've just conquered the world. Why? Because we know that one step is the start of something amazing. So why don't we cheer for ourselves in the same way? Here's the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Life isn't a race to the finish line. It's a series of moments, of choices, of steps. And when your energy is low, the best thing you can do is focus on the next step in front of you. Not the whole staircase, not the whole journey, just the next step. So the next time you feel stuck, don't look at the mountain in despair. Find your small win. Take that one step, no matter how small it seems, and then take another. Before you know it, you'll have built momentum, and that momentum will carry you farther than you ever thought possible. Remember, it's not the size of the win that matters, it's the act of moving forward, one small victory at a time. That's how progress is made. That's how mountains are climbed. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. How often do you try to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders? How often do you tell yourself, I've got this. I don't need help. We live in a society that celebrates independence, the idea of doing it all alone, as if asking for support is somehow a sign of weakness. But let me tell you the truth, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. We weren't designed to do life alone. Look at the world around you. Birds fly in flocks, wolves travel in packs, and even trees in a forest share nutrients through their roots. Nature itself is a constant reminder that strength lies in connection. And yet, when we're struggling, we so often retreat into ourselves, thinking we need to figure it out on our own. Imagine this, you're carrying a heavy bag up a steep hill. Every step feels impossible, and your legs are shaking. And then a friend walks by and offers to carry it with you, even if it's just for a little while. Would you refuse? Of course not. You'd welcome the relief. So why, when the burden isn't physical but emotional, do we hesitate to let others help? Let me share a story. A close friend of mine once went through a tough time struggling with work, family pressures, and their own sense of self-worth. For weeks, they bottled it up, thinking I don't want to burden anyone with my problems. But one day, they finally broke down and called a friend. They poured out everything, tears and all. Do you know what the friend said? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I'm here for you. That single conversation didn't solve all their problems, but it gave them something even more valuable, the strength to keep going. Sometimes all we need is someone to listen, someone to say, I see you and you're not alone. It's not about people fixing your problems for you. It's about knowing someone is in your corner, cheering you on, reminding you of your worth when you forget. And it's not just about seeking support during tough times. Inspiration can come from the people around us in the most unexpected ways. Have you ever been in a slump and then someone shares a story of their own resilience and suddenly you feel a spark again? Or maybe you've watched someone chase their dream with such passion that it reignites your own drive. People are like mirrors, they reflect the best parts of us back to ourselves when we can't see them clearly. Think about the times you've leaned on someone else, even for something small. Maybe you called a friend for advice, asked a colleague for help with a project, or sought guidance from a mentor. Didn't it make the journey easier? Didn't it remind you that you're part of something bigger than yourself? Now let's flip the script. Remember a time when someone leaned on you for support. Did you see them as weak, or did it strengthen your bond? Did you think less of them, or did you feel honored that they trusted you? That's the beauty of connection. It's a two-way street. When we seek support, we're not just receiving, we're giving others the opportunity to show up for us, to deepen the relationship, to build something unshakable together. There's a famous saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Life isn't about racing to the finish line, it's about the journey and the people who walk alongside us. Whether it's a friend, a family member, a mentor, or even a stranger who offers a kind word at just the right moment, these connections are what make us resilient. So the next time you're feeling stuck, lost, or overwhelmed, I urge you, don't retreat into yourself. Reach out, call a friend, join a community, share your story. And if you're not sure where to start, just say, I could use some help. Those 5 words can change everything. Ladies and gentlemen, strength is not about doing it all alone. It's about knowing when to lean on others and allowing them to lean on you. It's about building a web of connection that holds you up when you're weak and makes you even stronger when you're not. We are not meant to walk this path alone, so seek support, draw inspiration, and accept encouragement. Because when we walk together, there's no hill too steep, no burden too heavy, and no dream too far out of reach. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. How often do you choose the easy road? It's tempting, isn't it? To stay where it feels safe, where it's predictable and familiar. Comfort is alluring, like a warm blanket on a cold day. But let's be honest, comfort, while it feels good in the moment, rarely leads us to the places where we grow, where we truly thrive, or where we create something extraordinary. You see, life is full of moments where we face a choice to stick with what's easy or to step into what's challenging. And the harder path, the one that makes your heart race and your palms sweat, is often where courage lies. Courage isn't about being fearless. Let's clear that up right now. Courage is feeling the fear, hearing that voice in your head saying, what if I fail? And choosing to move forward anyway. It's about taking that first shaky step into the unknown. Not because you're sure of success, but because you know deep down it's worth it. Think about the times in your life when you felt the most alive. I guarantee they weren't moments of sitting back and playing it safe. Maybe it was the time you finally spoke up in a meeting, even though your voice was shaking. Maybe it was the day you took a leap of faith and started your own business. Or maybe it was as simple as telling someone how much they mean to you, even when you weren't sure how they'd respond. Let me tell you a story. There was a young woman I knew who had always dreamed of moving to a new city and starting fresh. But fear kept her rooted in her small town. What if she failed? What if she didn't make any friends? What if she missed home? For years, she stayed in her comfort zone, convincing herself it was fine. But deep down, she knew she wasn't truly living. One day, she made the decision to choose courage over comfort. She packed her bags, said goodbye, and stepped into a world that terrified her. The first few months were hard. There were tears, moments of doubt, and times when she wondered if she'd made a mistake. But then something amazing happened. She found her people, discovered her passion, and built a life she couldn't have imagined if she'd stayed where it was safe. That leap into the unknown became the best decision of her life. Now, think about your own life. What's the thing you've been avoiding because it feels too risky, too uncomfortable? Is it a dream you've been putting off? A conversation you've been too scared to have? A decision you know in your heart is right but feels overwhelming? Courage doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't always mean moving across the country or making some grand gesture. Sometimes courage is simply saying, I'm not okay, and asking for help. Sometimes it's setting a boundary with someone you love or taking a step toward a goal you've been too afraid to start. Here's the thing about choosing courage. It doesn't guarantee success. You might fail. You might stumble. But every time you choose courage, you're building something far more valuable than a perfect outcome. You're building yourself. You're proving to yourself that you can face the hard things and survive, that you're stronger than you think, and that you're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. Let's take an example from nature. Have you ever seen a butterfly emerge from its cocoon? It's not a graceful process. The butterfly has to struggle, pushing and straining to break free. But that struggle is what strengthens its wings, preparing it to fly. Without the courage to push through the discomfort, it would never soar. Life is much the same. The moments that feel the hardest, the most uncomfortable, are often the moments that prepare you to spread your wings. And let's be real, comfort isn't as safe as it seems. Staying in your comfort zone can lead to stagnation, regret, and a lingering sense of what if. Courage, on the other hand, might be messy, unpredictable, and even a little scary, but it's where growth happens. It's where you find the best parts of yourself. So, ladies and gentlemen, I challenge you to think about the choices ahead of you. The next time you face a decision between comfort and courage, I urge you to choose courage. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. Choose the path that makes your heart beat faster, the one that scares you just enough to remind you that you're alive. Because at the end of the day, It's not the easy moments we look back on with pride, it's the moments we dared to be brave. The moments we chose to step forward even when it would have been easier to stay still. Choose courage. Because your best life isn't waiting in your comfort zone, it's waiting on the other side of the air. Ladies and gentlemen, before I leave you, let me share a story that has stayed with me for years, a story about choosing courage over comfort when it matters most. There was a young boy, no more than 10 years old, living in a small, quiet town. He had a stutter, a severe one that made even the simplest words feel like a battle. At school, he avoided speaking whenever he could, terrified of the laughter that often followed his attempts. He stayed silent in class, never raised his hand, and kept his head down, living in the shadow of his fear. But one day, his teacher announced a school talent show. Students were buzzing with excitement, singing, dancing, magic tricks, you name it. The boy, though, sat in the back trying to disappear, but that night something stirred inside him. He'd always loved stories, and deep down, he had a dream of standing in front of an audience and telling one of his own. For days, he wrestled with his fear. What if they laugh at me? What if I can't get the words out? But something kept pulling him toward the idea. Despite every ounce of doubt, he signed up. He chose a short, simple story and practiced in front of the mirror every day. He stumbled, cried, and almost gave up more times than he could count. The night of the talent show came. As his name was called, his heart pounded like a drum. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room as he walked onto the stage, his knees shaking. He took a deep breath, clutching the microphone, and began. At first, the words came haltingly. He stumbled, paused, and tried again. But then something magical happened. The audience didn't laugh. They leaned in, listening intently, rooting for him with every word. Their encouragement gave him strength, and he pushed forward, finishing his story with a smile. When he stepped off the stage, the room erupted in applause, not because he was perfect, but because he was brave. That moment changed everything for him. It wasn't about whether he won or lost. It was about facing his fear, standing in the light, and proving to himself that he was stronger than he thought. That boy grew up to become a teacher, a storyteller, and an advocate for others who felt silenced by their fears. He spent his life encouraging others to choose courage, just as he had on that stage all those years ago. And here's the lesson he taught: fear is loud, but it's not insurmountable. Courage doesn't erase fear, it rises in spite of it. When we dare to step into the discomfort, when we choose bravery over ease, we open the door to transformation, not just for ourselves, but for everyone watching. So, my friends, when the stage is set and fear whispers in your ear, I hope you remember this story. I hope you remember the power of one brave choice. And I hope you choose courage again and again, no matter how shaky your knees or how uncertain your steps. Because the most beautiful moments in life often come right after we decide to be brave.